The strangest things about phones with styluses is that if it's not made by Samsung, it isn't premium. Motorola unfortunately doesn't break that rule, but that doesn't mean that the phones are going to be terrible. The Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 has a long name, a bunch of upgrades over the 2021 version, but does this budget phone work for 2024? Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and today I am given a phone with features that I generally don't use, and budget versions of stuff that I do. Let's get started. So I can't ignore that this phone is, after all, a budget phone. It's all plastic design, huge size, and battery, just scream budget, and this goes into the phone. New pricing is all over the place for some reason, with some going as high as $500 new, which is crazy seeing the 2023 version was $400 new and commonly found for $250 new now. But the 2022 version is the upgraded version of the 2021 version, which I liked. I still don't really use the headset jack or the pen, but it's cool to see and use for those that actually use it. There are some things like coloring books and notes, but for me the pen experience was kind of awkward, honestly. While this does feel like a reason to buy the phone, I would not recommend going that way. Instead, we get superior battery life and a decent screen. Throw anything at this, even gaming, and it works as expected. Of course, I'm talking about that 5000 mAh battery cell because the Snapdragon 695 is decent at best. Just like the screen, which sounds good being a 6.8-inch 1080p 120Hz LCD, which, again, sounds decent on paper, but in practice isn't that good. In classic Motorola fashion, there's no always-on display, but there is an option for a peak display when you move your phone or a notification comes in, as well as an awkward tap-to-wake system. You can even double tap to sleep, something that all phones should be doing by now, but instead, other companies, like Google, just copy Apple. If you didn't get that, there's no tap to sleep on any Apple products, ever. The screen looks overly warm and just not as bright as I would like it. I've even changed settings and it just doesn't look good to me, and that's before nightlight kicks in. And if I'm being honest, content viewing isn't the best either, especially since they didn't add stereo speakers into this phone either. The 120Hz display looks good, but starts to fall apart when you set up the phone. I swear, with nothing on this phone, it was actually super smooth, but once I transferred the little information that I moved to here, performance just dropped. The processor and screen just don't match on this phone, just like how it didn't really feel like 120Hz on the equally powerful Samsung A52 5G that I recently reviewed. While there are options for 6 or 8 GB of RAM and 256 GB of storage, this one is the 4 GB of RAM and 128 GB of UFS 2.1 storage option. So that means we get low RAM and reasonable storage and speed, but we do get the option for an SD card slot, another budget phone staple. What is surprising is the Android 13 support and reasonable update speed, giving me the November 2023 security patch on December 1st of 2023. This phone is coming up on 2 years, so who knows how long software support will last, but it is surprising to see. Personally, I don't think this phone deserves a camera section, so I'm just going to talk about it here. There is one thing I am okay with, but other than that, it's really just a basic setup, as expected. We get a 50 megapixel main camera that is optically stabilized, but only allows for 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second video, with the latter option actually showing up after some software updates. There's weirdly no 4K here, which seems kind of dumb. The other camera is an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor that actually focuses, meaning that you can use this as a macro lens, which is not something that you see in many budget phones. The last sensor is a depth sensor, which always feels weird. The processor can handle 2 cameras at once, but can't process depth out of the main sensor only. And obviously there are a bunch of features in the camera app, but most of these features end up being gimmicks, and the overall image that these cameras put out just has this like budget feel to them. It's kind of like a film look, but bad. Then the front camera is an overkill 16 megapixel sensor, which gives us 4 megapixels or a full 16 megapixels if you set it, crushing all detail regardless of the sizing. 1080p at 30 frames per second on this camera is very expected. I like that there's no extra macro camera, but the depth sensor is simply a waste. At least the 2023 version finally dropped the pointless 5 or 2 megapixel sensors. Yeah, that depth sensor is a 2 megapixel sensor. What a joke. While slightly explained, is using the phone terrible? No. Actually, I've been using this phone for a decent amount of time, finally switching phones after 2 weeks, so how bad can this phone really be? The phone is like remembering weights on your shoulder. You can open up some apps, scroll through social media, go to type something, and boom, you're rewarded with the mushy, vibrating motor that rattles this phone, feeling and sounding terrible. You take the phone out of your pocket and touch the fingerprint scanner, and it unlocks. Nice. Then you grab it with your other hand, wait for the face unlock to do its thing, only for it to give up half of the time. The color is nice, the Zoolander in you wishes that it was blue steel and not steel blue, but then you see some scratches and remember Gorilla Glass something on the front, or maybe not. I only found one place saying that it was Gorilla Glass 3, but the frame and back are both plastic, and that's not really a good thing. Sure, it's a budget phone, so no cracking on the back, but dropping a plastic phone that weighs 215 grams does not help prevent dents. Not to mention that this screen has already been replaced before. Okay, I feel like I've spent too much time kind of comparing stuff, but what I'm trying to say is that I keep getting reminded that this is a budget phone, but not when comparing devices. The budget aspect just creeps up on you. Now, just like pretty much every budget phone, this phone started out very expensive for no reason, and now it's actually cheap. I misspoke and will correct myself again because this phone actually has 6GB of RAM and can be expanded to a strong 7.5GB by using 1.5GB of internal storage. That said, it looks like the T-Mobile and the unlocked version get 6GB of RAM while AT&T and Verizon get a strange 4GB of RAM. Like I said, using the phone for quick stuff, not the best, but the battery life from the phone allows you to wait and not worry about draining the battery during that time. While not record-breaking, I was given the option of 3 days of battery life, something I'm not comfortable doing in a lot of phones. Ending the day with over 80% was super easy to do, even when scrolling endlessly from time to time. Charging speed is fine, generally you're going to do this at night, but it does support Quick Charge 3.0. That being said, I've only seen it go to about 10 watts of charging out of this USB-C 2.0 port. At under $150, this is ultimately a Pixel 3 or Samsung S9 performance-wise with better battery life, but also running Android 13. Size and spec-wise, this would probably match something like a Samsung Note 9 or Note 10 Plus, but those are a little to a lot more expensive than the Moto G Stylus 5G 2022. And again, both of those phones don't run Android 13. So sure, when new, this is a terrible deal, but in the used market, this phone can actually be good. Now, I don't think that budget phones are ever worth it. You should know that this is my thought process by now. Rarely do phones change my mind like the Nothing Phone 1 did. I can appreciate that companies like Motorola, LG, and TCL try to give people options for cheaper than Samsung Note series prices, but at the same time, it's hard to recommend them because they do border the another piece of e-waste title. As always, I do look at these phones with United States glasses, understanding that Swappa, Amazon, and eBay don't always have the best deals in other countries. But those that do have these options, the Moto Stylus 5G 2022 isn't worth it unless you can get it close to that $100 price point. All of this said, I am glad to be moving to another phone, maybe to one that actually has a better camera, even if it is just one. And that's my review of the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022. Truly, I'm indecisive on whether this is ultimately a good or bad phone. But what about you? Why do you like budget models? Let me know what you think, and as always, thanks for watching.